go to the trouble of installing Git and so forth and creating GitHub accounts and installing Visual Studio Code. If you have a favorite text editor, feel free to use it. Just know that obviously we can't necessarily provide a whole lot of help for that. And Visual Studio Code is very nice for JavaScript because it was sort of made for that. And we know lots of extensions and things that make it even easier, and I'll tell you some of those shortcuts as we go if you happen to be using that. So I suggest that you put all your projects for the bootcamp in some folder in your home directory with nothing else in it. And please, please, please create new folders for every project that we do and create new GitHub repos for all the projects that we do. We'll show you how to do it if you don't know. Who has used Git before? Okay, maybe about half. So, and again, a fair amount of the class has some web experience, so please be patient. This week we're going to be doing a lot of non-React HTML, CSS, JavaScript stuff. So just be patient. You might still learn something about the basics that you didn't already know as we go through some of this. So if you have the folder where you want everything to live, let's go ahead and mookdir for our first project. Make a directory that is mkdir. Let's call it PeopleFactory, for lack of a better word. After you mook that dir, don't forget to change into that dir with cd space PeopleFactory, and I'll show you this shortcut right off the bat if you don't know it, because it will save you lots of time and lots of typos. Since that folder exists, if I start typing the name of it and hit tab, it will autocomplete, saving me from the possibility of a typo, also making it faster. Tab completion on the command line. It's a wonderful thing. Yes, sir. This is the terminal. So your terminal will probably open up in your home directory by default. So just make a directory in there for Extern Bootcamp. Make a directory inside there for PeopleFactory. Yeah. Git bash is fine. Git bash is fine. All right, having done that, let's go ahead and create a Git repository. So who has never used Git and has never used any other kind of source code management or version control? Okay. You know the basics of version control and what the point is? I mean, the name suggests part of what it does, but we'll be using a lot of it and talking about it as we go and explaining the value. But it'll give us a way to always get back to previously working versions, to save it in chunks so that we can always retrace our steps just a little bit at a time. We're going to be making very frequent commits so that if you forget how you did something the day before, you can go back and see just what you changed in that step. Yeah. That's because I have a theme installed. Yeah, don't worry. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. I just have my prompt that tells me which folder I'm in, and it'll tell me if I have a Git repository as well, as we're about to see, because we're about to create one. So to create, I'm sorry? Okay, good. You should be. This is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. All right, we're in our PeopleFactory directory, and we're going to type git init space dot, which probably, that last part probably isn't necessary, but dot, by the way, is a reference to the current directory. Initialized empty Git repository in that directory. Okay, now we have a Git repository without a gosh darn thing in it. If we type ls to see what's in our directory, we won't see anything. If, however, we look at our hidden files, let's do an ls, that's list, by the way, list the contents of the directory, ls space -la to get a longer list of the contents, including hidden stuff. We'll see a little bit more. Dot is just the current directory. Dot dot is just the directory one level up in the hierarchy. But we see there's a folder there called .git. So there is something there. If we open that folder in the Finder, we'll see a little more, or in Explorer if you're in Windows. So let's type open space .git, and that will open it in Explorer on Windows or Finder on Mac. And we'll see there's actually some stuff inside that. That's because we already do have a Git repository. For open, don't worry about it. Anybody have that work on Windows? Does open work for anybody on Windows?
You use start instead of open.
Start, okay, thank you. So start space .git. And we see there's a bunch of stuff here. But it's all hidden because we don't generally have to worry about this. But know that Git is keeping track of a whole bunch of stuff for us. And more stuff will show up here as we go along. If we type git status, we see a message on branch master, initial commit, nothing to commit. This just means we just started. We're on a branch called master. We're not going to get super deep into branches, but the idea is you can have more than one copy of your code that you're working on at a time, make changes one place and it doesn't impact the other. And then if you do want to merge those things together later, you can. For example, I'm going to create separate branches for the morning and afternoon. So you don't need to do this thing, but I'm going to create a branch for the morning. Nah, I didn't mean .d. Did I? Why's my brain? Create a morning branch. B. Checkout dash B. That's right. Gosh dang, I knew that was wrong. My brain was not cooperating with me for a moment. So anyway, we have a branch with nothing on it, as we saw. So the next thing we're going to do is create a corresponding repository on GitHub that we can sync with this. So you all have GitHub accounts, as we saw in the spreadsheet. So go to your GitHub account. There's an extra special GitHub account for Extra Bootcamp 2017 Session 2. That's where I'll be pushing all the code. That is linked from the website, as long as you go to the Session 2 website. So don't panic. And I'm going to create a new repository. So look at the plus up here and say new repository. Let's give that repository a name. I'm going to call it PeopleFactory. You don't have to name it exactly the same as I do, but please keep in mind, we're going to look here to check your progress and stuff, so please name it something sensible. And please don't make one big repository for the entire bootcamp because it makes it much, much harder for us. And it makes it harder for you too, ultimately. Once you've done that, go ahead and hit Create Repository. And then we'll just leave it on this screen for a moment. So what's going to happen is we're going to keep checking things into our local history every time we make major changes, complete major tasks. And then from time to time, we will sync it with this. So you have an entire Git repository just on your local machine. But you can sync it with a service like GitHub or Bitbucket or a number of others. GitLab's another one. And that way we can share it with other folks. So that's what we're going to do. Notice on this page, it gives you a couple of choices. Create a new repository on the command line or push an existing repository from the command line. We already created one, right? So that's what we're going to do, but we have nothing, we have no files in it yet. So we're going to need to do just a little bit more before we actually sync it with GitHub. So actually, this first line from create a new repository is actually something we could use. Let's do this. Echo prints things to the screen. Let's print this. I will paste this line in Slack. So that double greater than sign tells it, take what you would have printed to the screen and instead put it in this file. All caps readme.md, MD for Markdown. I'll talk more about what Markdown is in just a moment. If I do that, then we'll see we actually have a README file. So here's the line that you'll run. Just gives us a README file with one line in it. So now that we have a file, we want to actually put it in our Git repository. If I type git status right now, but you can always type to figure out what's going on, it'll say on branch morning, initial commit, untracked file. So untracked file means there's a file here that Git doesn't know anything about. So we need to tell it about it. Notice it says use git add to track. So that's what we'll do. Git space add. I'm going to type capital R and hit tab so that I don't mistype the name, readme.md. Once I type that, Git is officially tracking this file and has actually added it to the repository if we were to look deep down inside that .git directory. The point is it now knows about it. But it has not actually made a permanent pointer to that file just yet. After we add, we have to commit. So we will type git commit space, we're not done yet, -m space, quote, add readme, end quote. So we're giving our commit a message, which we will always do. Because when we look back over our history, we want to be able to make some sense of it. We'll talk more about the format of these messages. Once that's done, you should see a message kind of like that. If we run git status, now it'll say nothing to commit, working tree clean. I don't really know what this tree business is, but that seems good. I like that. That's comforting. So, having done that, now we can sync it with GitHub. So, push an existing repository from the command line, we're ready to do that. So these two lines, if you put your, for your browser windows wide enough, you should see a little thing to copy to the clipboard. Use that so you don't mistype it. Just copy that, paste it in your terminal. The first line will go ahead and run, and then just hit enter to run the second. In my case, I'm changing this to morning. But you don't need to do that. All right, we can talk about what those two commands actually did. But if you go back to your GitHub after that, just copy these right from here. If you refresh this page, then you'll see the README is actually there. Yeah, it may prompt you to log into GitHub, in which case, put in your credentials. Should have been foolproof. You should have copied and pasted that. You should have used tab completion on README. Hardly any opportunity to even mistype. Yes, sir. Okay. So there are a couple ways you can, now you've got different things happening locally than you have remotely. If you already did so the add remote line should have worked. So go ahead and delete your README from your computer. Actually, well, you already committed to, didn't you? Tell you what, nobody else do this. Do git, take that git push command, just hit up to get back to it, and add a -f at the end. No, git push dash. Did you copy and paste the ones out of GitHub? Oh, because you already know you're going to have a problem. Okay. Well, you could, but that's overkill. Instead, you could, darn. Okay, there are two commands that you copy from GitHub. The first one is git remote add origin something, right? Go ahead and run that one. And you shouldn't see any output. It should just run. What do you mean? You're not in the terminal? I don't know what that means. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. On your if you right, we'll just pause the